You go, it's not easy getting here, and it's not easy surviving. So everyone who gets here deserves a lot of respect. Going, you made it. Again, cultures used to, at births, welcome, welcome, we're so glad you came.
Astrology, is essentially a study of how the celestial influences affect human life on Earth.
The true hero has gone through a self-submission, a self-transcendence in which she or he is, in a sense, placing their being in the service of a larger whole, for the future, for a new life, for a new being.
The stars and the planets actually take on the form of a language, and that's why we have the word astrology, astrologos, like star speech.
To think astrologically, you're really going to have to allow yourself to open your mind to first the fact that any and everything is possible.
Astrology is a language of how life is encoded, describing not only the archetypal dimensions of character, but also the evolving qualities of the various seasons of the soul you are living through. Astrology grants access to the archetypal shape of the future. It doesn't tell you what's going to happen. It simply reveals what kinds of ingredients or resources that will be available to you today, next week, next month, or even for the whole year. It's up to you to harness your free will and decide what to make of those potential resources and archetypal themes. The astrological birth chart is a mandala map of the solar system when you took your first breath. The zodiac defines a spectrum of archetypes. Where the electromagnetic spectrum defines gradations of energy, the archetypal spectrum defines differentiations in character, in mythic imagery, and meaning. Everyone has 3 or 4 strong archetypal themes in their birth chart. The seasons of nature are a reflection of these governing principles of the zodiac. The ancients were tuned in to 12 distinct seasons or moods of nature.
Astrology is, for me, the study of time.
So what is astrology? It's a means by which we can examine time and the unique qualities behind time.
Well, I define astrology really as it's almost like a cosmic mirror of reflecting our condition, our experiences here on Earth.
Astrology is the celestial weather.
Additionally, it is the clearest, most concise, and yet most well-developed system of personality analysis that human beings have ever created. It's a 12-fold typology with an overlapping of elements and modes that makes total sense and tells a beautiful, elaborate, but comprehensible story that no other personality typology has touched.
Because after all, it's a language. And it's important to realize it's a language where all of the meaning comes from human experience. The language of astrology is basically a language of resonance or vibration. And everything in the universe, everything in existence is in some kind of vibrational state or another. And that's what we're trying to do when we use astrology, is we're trying to understand the vibrational signature.
It's the divine intervention of what's going on around us with what's going on inside us and what's going on in our lives.
I think of the astrology chart as almost like the karmic code of one's spiritual DNA.
Astrology is a cosmic fingerprint of the exact moment, place, and time that you happen to come through and land on this planet.
It's like an X-ray machine that allows you to see directly inside the psyche, so that you're not just trying to figure out the generic psyche of humankind, but every chart, every individual human being is clarified by virtue of their individual chart. It's like gaining insight into the psychological DNA that makes up that person.
We take a metaphysical backdrop and apply the language and style of fairly hard-hitting psychology, and we pull those two together. The basic notion is that I assume that my client is an evolving soul, an ancient soul who has had previous incarnations, but who has come to a place in this moment where their soul is characterized by certain understandings, certain wisdoms, certain weaknesses, certain confusions that I think are all reflected in the birth chart, and that the psychological work that the person is doing on himself or herself is their spiritual work.
What astrology does is it gives each and every person its own particular relationship to the cosmos. You have your natal chart, which grounds you in time and space where you were born and incarnate onto the planet, and you can engage your own free will to enact the archetypes that you've been given in your natal chart to embody them in the more noble expressions of them once you have an understanding of the nature of the archetypes and the multivalence of the archetypes.
But these are all forces that we need to make peace with and be integrated with. And a lot of what astrology is about for me is learning how to own all of yourself, all of your chart and every planet in it and everything that's going on in that chart. And the people that really do that, when they own all their combinations, all their aspects, everything in the chart, their lives are full. Instead of getting into hard relationships that are mainly for the purpose of making you aware of what planets you're not in touch with symbolically, you get to be creative, you get to be full of life, you get to do other things. So most people live their lives trying to integrate the fact that, you know, their moon and Venus are square in their chart, and they have a hard time since their mother created this pattern for them that was difficult, and they play it out in their relationships with women throughout their lives. Most people spend most of their energy trying to work out these fundamental conflicts, and if we could just understand them and embody them and realize it doesn't have to be either or, I can make this moon happy, I can make this Venus happy, then suddenly we're not spending our lives in conflict with other people, and we've learned those lessons. So you got to learn those astrological lessons, then you can graduate and go on to something better. And that's being integrated, being whole, and having good relationships, and having a happy life, and having a creative, fulfilling destiny, and contribution and right livelihood.
The planet is the part of yourself, your mind, Mercury, what you're attached to, what you value, Venus and so on. The sign is the colour through which you express your communication, your love, your actions, Mars, and so on. And the house is the area of your life where that is going to work. And of course you can use aspects to show that one area of your life is going to impinge on another area of your life.
Now if you look at planets, planets are energy. Planets are the actual living force. And you can say that the planets represent, at least in a human being, represent specific layers within our psyche. Specific layers within our psyche where definite creative activities are at work. So the planets represent our energies. Now our energies, well, they're constantly moving, with or without our awareness, sifting through the space-time continuum, sifting through the world around us, selecting people, places, and things to get in touch with, to focus attention on, to interact with. The houses represent this process of selecting people, places, things to pay attention to interact with. The signs of the zodiac. Signs of the zodiac are in some ways, they're the glue or the paste that holds it all together in our minds.
Signs tend to add an element of attitude, a psychological agenda, a set of values.
Space and time are not as separate as they once seemed, and that having a map in time can actually help one navigate in space also, and that with an astrology chart, one can actually lay out the map in time.
The ephemeris, well, a 20th century ephemeris will list planetary positions and other astronomical phenomena for every month and day of the 20th century. So in other words, if one wants to know where any given planet was on any given date in the 20th century, one would look up that information in an ephemeris. Similarly, a 21st century ephemeris will do the same for planetary positions in the 21st century. It's as simple as that. To an outsider, to a non-astrologer, it's going to look like a book full of numbers and symbols. To an astrologer, it is the combined biography of billions of souls.
We're all practicing astrology. All of our calendars come from the sky. All cultures derive their story from it. They invited in the sun's power to animate that culture's story about what it thinks it's doing. The days of the week, we have 7 days of the week because of 7 visible planets, to honor what those planets represent. That in fact, astrology is a language about cultivating real freedom.
The constellational patterns, and we're using the signs. both are like two great sets of gears that are continually interacting with each other. So you've got the stellar patterns, and then you have the signs, and the signs are based upon the solstices and equinoxes, while the stellar patterns remain those shapes and forms for millions of years. But over 26,000 years, every stellar pattern gets to be behind every sign.
The Sumerians of ancient Mesopotamia were the first recorded civilization. The Sumerians spent thousands of years observing the heavens and handed down their knowledge to the Babylonians. Sumerians developed an astral theology relating the sun, moon, and planets to their pantheon of gods and goddesses. They were the first to divide a circle into 360 degrees of 60 minutes of arc each. Their astronomers actually specialized in astrology, spending centuries on top of their ziggurat pyramids, recording significant astronomical information that became star omens. These star omens were used by the priest scribes to advise the king and give predictions about the fate of the nation. The Babylonians built on the observations of the Sumerians to develop the earliest form of astrology, the modern pseudoscience. They developed an extensive body of star lore, naming the sun, moon, and 5 visible planets, developed the zodiac, and learned to track the celestial cycles. They also discovered the 18-year eclipse cycle and named the days of the week. The Indians, Chinese, and Egyptians all developed an intricate form of astrology, which all contributed to the development of astronomy. But eventually astronomy and its religious focus was handed down to the Greeks, and they made the great advances, merging it with their sophisticated mathematics and philosophy. Ptolemy of Alexandria, the greatest center of learning in the ancient world, wrote the classic books on astrology, including Tetrabiblos, which had a lasting influence up into the Renaissance. It was the Greeks who first developed horoscopic astrology, used to supposedly track a person's destiny.
The Babylonians probably get the lion's share of the credit because they developed the system of the constellations that is recognizable today. They came up with the basic signs of the zodiac and a lot actually about the interpretations of them. They started being able to follow the motions of the planets. They did observations over centuries. They compiled methods ultimately of being able to compute the positions, not as accurately as we can today, but with reasonable accuracy. They were able to develop to the point where they could predict eclipses. Now, anybody who's been in an eclipse has seen a real eclipse. This is an awesome phenomenon.
Scientists say there are 4 known forces in the universe: gravity, electromagnetism, and the strong and weak nuclear forces that hold the atom together. However, there is one force that they forgot about, and that is the force of consciousness. Consciousness is the force that allowed scientists to think up those forces in the first place, and astrology is a language of consciousness.
I think consciousness is the primary reality, and that everything that we experience on the material plane is a crystallization of consciousness, so that consciousness is immanent in all things. It's a sort of field of intelligence that unites all of life and is orchestrating events in such a way that it brings about the further growth and transformation of individual consciousnesses, so that we are being led, in a sense, or grown from within back toward source.
Astrology, really the core of it, one of the foundations of it is mythology, or as I like to call them, sacred stories of different cultures. And to me, that the great astrologer and even the great psychologist of the future, I think, will be more of a psychomythologist rather than just focused on psychopathology.
In astrology, Jupiter says, the blessings we say, the stories we predominantly tell, attract the molecules of their manifestation. You know, the early Kabbalists said, if God is everything, the divine is everything, how does God create using nothing outside of God? And they said, well, by analogy, we humans, how do we create using no material outside ourselves? And they said, in our imagination. So when it's said that, we are made in the image of God, it doesn't mean we look like, old white guys with beards. It means we are dreamed in the mind of the divine, and our capacity to imagine and dream is our honorable assignment to collaborate in dreaming the world into being. It is the divine spark within each one of us.
The most fascinating aspect of astrology is having this roadmap
of your psyche. I mean, realizing that at the moment you take birth, here is this amazing living, breathing system, archetypal system of these energies that create and sustain your reality.
The universe gave us this extraordinary kind of orchestration of patterning between the movements of the heavens and the patterns of human experience in such a way that it requires the human contribution, the basic principles of meaning that inform these orchestrated synchronicities. Those principles are archetypal, and that means they are fundamentally multivalent. They express themselves through a multiplicity of possible modes in different concrete ways. An archetype has this metaphorical richness of meaning that really only a poetically, imaginatively cultivated intelligence can grasp.
I think astrology was born out of Platonic thinking, because Robert Schmidt and Demetra George and others say it really just coalesced very suddenly between about 400 and 200 BC.
Astrology is the language that speaks to us and reawakens what we really do know and what we really do hope is true about collaborating with everything. And it honors, each of our uniqueness. It says if you love chipmunks or wolves or a particular color or culture, go for it. It means something. Pursue that thing. It's your unique contribution to the team. You again are its ambassador.
Pretty much every culture has had an astrology, and it's what's very obvious is the sky. I mean, the sky is out there. And every culture, it's the idea of being able to see these wonderful motions in the sky at night. It's awesome. The idea of being able to see the moon and the changes in the moon as a timing phenomenon is awesome. The idea of realizing that there's this solar cycle of the year that is so important from an agricultural standpoint. I mean, these are all things that humans have looked at and wondered for millennia.
The map of consciousness is the natal chart, is the birth chart. Another way to say that is, what is the soul desiring in the current life? In other words, how is the identity structured in potentia to reflect and thus actualize the soul's desire?
It's hard for me not to like the mythology. It's hard, that's an amazing part of astrology. It's hard for me not to think of it as a symbolic language because I'm a poet and I've studied a lot of poetry, so I can see, the symbol and the theme, and a chart is this little tiny thing that packs a lot of meaning into it. So it is like a poem.
Perhaps best yet, a musical score. That is to say, our astrology chart is a diagram of how our mind-body's energy resonates. And in the same way, as transits move through the sky, they sound different notes. When a planet lines up in the sky today with where it was when we were born, then the present resonant quality of the world around us vibrates our own resonant quality. So there is a stimulation and energy being added.
To think of three of the 29.5-year cycles of Saturn is a pretty good way of creating an astrological metaphor for life through 3 stages. Youth, midlife, and the cycle of the elder, essentially. In each of these cycles, a person's consciousness is optimized for certain particular processes, and we have to get each process right because the subsequent one will build on the previous one. The first Saturn cycle, which culminates at the Saturn return, is about dreaming. It's about dreaming your life. It's about finding the vision for your life, and your attitude, your consciousness, and your circumstances are maximized for the quest, for the seeking, for taking in all of these different perspectives about who you might be.
I think these things should be honored and marked, and I'm so happy to see that the Saturn return is actually becoming part of the mainstream vernacular now. You hear many people banding this term about now as if it's, more common knowledge and more interested in it, because it's like there's a name for it instead of just turning 30.
Well, the Saturn return obviously is, probably one of the most critical crystallization points of your character and your character structure. When you reach 28 to 31, Saturn returns back to its natal position where it was when you were born, and the Saturn archetype has to do with maturity and discipline and authority and how you take authority, and whether or not you're going to have self-mastery, or are you going to let other people or other institutions have control and mastery over you.
At the first Saturn return, you have reached the form of your adult character, and you need to begin to make the transition into second Saturn cycle work, which is taking your dream and making it real, making a stand in your community. Here's what I'm going to do with my life. Here are the people to whom I'm going to make commitments. Will I be a single person or a married person? In what will I believe? And all the answers are far less than the dreams of youth. We have to get used to smaller, but in the smaller, everything becomes so rich because it's real, and we're actually beginning to give our gift essentially to the community. Then we come to the second Saturn return, and my understanding of this has been rather theoretical, but is beginning to become real. And I'm getting the feeling that my theoretical predictions seem to be fitting the experiences I'm having, which is always encouraging. As we enter the cycle of the elder, there arises in us an urge to give away what we have accomplished. The elders who are happy are the elders whose gifts are being received. The middle cycle of life is acquisitive, where we are making our stand in the world. Some of that involves gathering our reputation, gathering our tribe, gathering our family, and we're overjoyed by our successes and saddened by our defeats. And it becomes strange. At the second Saturn return, it's not that we relish defeat, but we begin to relish the prospect of giving away everything that we have accomplished. I'm discovering a wonderful spaciousness at the second Saturn return.
I think it's fascinating that we live in these bodies on these spherical planets orbiting stars, I think that as the spirit comes down to be born on Earth here, you have a situation where it's kind of like a sponge wiping water off of a counter, collecting the water. It's like your spirit is that sponge collecting the sort of celestial configuration that's happening in the solar system, and then depositing that energy, that essence, that imprint, that pattern into your body, into your soul, your body-soul connection. And suddenly you take that first breath and you wake up on this planet, and you're here to do the mission of embodying those forces.
Einstein has some wonderful articles on the nature of God and so on, and he really hit upon it exactly. But even though, we have to remember, even though imagination is more important than knowledge, just why is it more important? Because without it, we're dead. Without it, we're soulless.
I feel like if we, as astrologers, even though it's wonderful to learn all the techniques and do all the digital work, but if we get too digitized in our astrology, that the soul can be lost. And to me, the basis of astrology is the mythology. And if that gets divorced from it, then I think we're going down a slippery slope that may end up kind of disconnecting from the heart.
Where the spirit and matter come together is where soul exists in the human, and then the soul of the individual is connected almost like a deep well going down to the common water table of the collective soul of humanity and the soul of the world, the anima mundi.
Well, what you're talking about is known as the world soul, and I don't know how it could possibly be, but I strongly suspect that it is. It's not God in the usual sense of the word. It's more like the general field of aliveness that permeates everything. Not only permeates, but creates. My view is that the physical world is divinity in the process of self-actualization. So one of the respects in which, I never thought of putting it quite this way, one of the respects in which we're a microcosm of the macrocosm is just as we attempt to actualize ourselves and our bodies, the physical universe is the world soul actualizing itself in body.
The numinous is something that can move someone to tears. It can be so powerful that it can be awesome, awe-inspiring, awful, terrifying even, or profoundly
healing, and so it has different aspects.
Shamanic astrology is about having a connection, a direct connection with spirit. And what I mean by spirit here, from an astrological perspective, is the communication between the human being and the cosmos, the planetary energies, the archetypes associated with the constellational patterns.
One's birth chart says this is a real map, it's a symbolic map of a symbolic map of the interior community of you. And each planet represents, doesn't cause necessarily, but represents a quality of intelligence and beauty that suffuses the universe. And each of us have a kind of unique relationship to those planetary intelligences about this. We're all part of one large pulsing dream.
Having a spiritual practice for any astrologer is very important because it keeps you in tune with the cosmos, which in turn keeps you in tune with your clientele, which keeps you in tune with the particular clients that are coming to see you that day.
Part of being a good astrologer is learning to be fluent in the language of just about any religion or philosophy, because you have to be ready to meet your clients where they are. I got a degree in religion. It was about as close as I could come in those days to studying anything that was halfway relevant to astrology. And I've always been appreciative of my education in religion, in that I can speak to a Hindu or a Buddhist or a Christian or a Muslim and know something of where they're coming from, know their language.
The point of time and space into which you were born has certain characteristics that really imprint on your mind and your consciousness, and therefore dispose you to be a certain way. And as you become more proficient at using that potential and educating that attitude, so you become more compassionate, more understanding, more effective, more supportive of others, you become happier and you become regenerated.
I am getting more and more into a oneness consciousness. I know as part of that consciousness, I'm beginning to understand that time and space are not what we think they are as a people. That time and space have a different reality.
Astrology is really an awareness that everything in the universe is connected to everything in the universe, and that as above, so below, as without, so within, and that we are like mirrors, and as we watch anything out there, we're watching something in here.
If we want to understand how an astrology chart works, we have to understand that a person fills their astrology chart with their life. And, you know, you can think of it as a potential or a pattern or a blueprint, a potential. And we express that potential in our character progressively as we move from different levels of awareness.
And the very fact that planets have something to do with it also connects us to a higher dimension, you know, to the cosmos. And that it's not just out there, it's what's out there is also inside of us.
As an astrologer, I view myself as a musician, as a poet, as an artist, because it's not just the mechanical scientific side of the equation. That's not important. That's not fair. It is important, but it's only half the equation. It's only part of the picture. It's like the left brain without the right brain. We have a brain that functions on two hemispheres. As an astrologer, we have to function on the hemisphere of both left brain science, right brain art. We have to function both on the yin and the yang, or the yang and the yin, to have parallel construction.
Yang is active, yin is receptive. I don't like the word passive, because passive implies it's doing nothing. It's doing everything, half of everything.
Even Americans seem at least open to entertaining the idea that their souls are on long and complicated journeys, and one lifetime is not your only shot at it, and that there is ultimately far more fairness in this universe than might meet the eye.
One thing's for sure from my studies of astrology, and that is that I've been given direct knowledge that there is a creator, that there has to be a divine intelligence guiding the universe, guiding the solar system, guiding people's lives. So my study of astrology has instilled in me a deeper faith in the eternal being.
I believe in reincarnation. I think the evidence in support of reincarnation these days is just overwhelming if you take the time to really look into it. So I don't believe that consciousness begins with this life or ends with this life. And with that in mind, I don't think that the chart can be conflated with the individual, with the person. I think that we inhabit charts, or we take on charts in the same way that a student takes on a curriculum of courses.
One of the basic things I like to say to people is that if you are true to yourself, you will have painted yourself into a corner. Your life will be impossible if you are true to yourself. So about being true to yourself, how bad do you want it? You know, and I always picture God sitting back there kind of filing her nails, just waiting to see, you know, whether you're going to so value being true to yourself that the laws of magic have to be invoked on your behalf. It's essentially how it works.
But everything is spiritual, including geometry.
It's magic. And from that standpoint, it's the same magic that happens when you listen to a poem or a piece of music or see a piece of artwork, that it's not about what the words are that are on the piece of paper, and it's not about the notes that are individual that you hear in the piece of music, and it's not about the colors that are used on the canvas, but you stand in front of that painting, or you listen to the music, or you hear or read the poem, and something happens. And that something that happens is magic. And you see, we are all Magi. Magi were Zoroastrian priests, just like a rabbi was a Hebrew priest. And as Magis, as magicians, our job is to alter the time-space continuum. Our job is to do magic.
I would define it as a system that describes life cycles.
We've all got things. We've all got things that are never going to get fixed, because they represent the areas in which we cling to things that we shouldn't even be doing in the first place. And then you can turn around and find something that is going to bring you complete happiness and complete fulfillment if you'll only give up your addictions. So the astrology of being happy is an irony about two kinds of happiness, the kind we steal and the kind we earn.
When I discovered astrology, it was quite mind-blowing, because suddenly I did have to acknowledge, wow, we really are connected. I mean, this isn't just a lip service or, you know, something that's touchy-feely and misguided humanitarianism. This is a very real phenomenon. Not only are we all connected, but there really does appear to be a greater intelligence that is conscious of us.
It enriched my understanding of myself and my spiritual path and all the people that were important to me, and just the awareness of cycles and what was coming and what has been. It really informed the macro so beautifully that it's really made me feel at home in this universe like no other thing has.
Astrology is meant not to limit us to the specific qualities of our own birth chart, but to expand our horizons, to be more active participants in a cosmic consciousness.
Chogyam Rinpoche once wrote, "Enlightenment is the ego's greatest disappointment."
There is quite a difference between spirituality and religious ideology, and astrology is not a belief system, and I think we need to make that perfectly clear. You don't believe in astrology. Astrology is something to know about.
It's an art, not a science. And that every moment, every chart you look at is totally unique. There are so few charts that look even at all like each other. And so here's a chance. It's almost like going to an art gallery and looking at a whole new painting and saying, wow, let me see what the symbolism is there. Let me see what the experience of that painting is. And you do that with a chart, and the experience dances, it's alive, it's unfolding.
And I think that's what a lot of people think astrology. They mistakenly think that it's just this you read I'm a Leo, and that fixes you at that point. And to that I would say, because I'm a layman at this, I'm at the tip of the iceberg of just learning some of these things. But what I've come to understand is we are so multi-layered, that there is so much to each of us, and that the sun sign is a piece of the puzzle. But if that's the only piece you look at, you're missing an incredible mosaic of who you are as an individual.
The Copernican revolution was absolutely pivotal for the modern period. Before that, the human race was the center of the cosmos. Everything was focused on us. Man is the highest creation of life on Earth, and everything centered around us. Copernicus said, no, we're just one planet amongst one star, amongst billions of stars. And the more we find out about the galaxy and the universe itself, we become less and less significant, less and less meaningful to it. What the astrological perspective does is it turns that on its head. It says that not that the Earth is the center of the universe, but every individual, every person has its own specific relationship to the divine through the birth chart.
Astrology is part of a larger inquiry, a larger practice that involves a spiritual pursuit, a desire to become more connected with both the external universe and the internal universe.
But we hold at least the one card of consciousness. And consciousness gives us the capacity to respond intelligently, to learn from our experience, and to make choices. And I feel that we human individuals contain within us that same uncertainty principle, and it is called consciousness. We will make choices within an array of implicit possible realities that are built into your birth chart. This is not a total over-the-top New Age, you can just create anything, with your will. So I want to be Miss South Dakota, 2012. I'm going to have to do a lot of creative visualization for painfully obvious reasons. It's also relevant that I don't want to be Miss South Dakota 2012. It's not in my chart. It's not in my heart. It's not in my soul. But within my chart are a great range of possibilities. And I will, with my choices, with my consciousness, pop the quantum wave and bring one concrete reality to manifestation out of many potentials. As an astrologer working with a client, my task is to lay before the client the menu. Here are all the quantum waves, so to speak, within your chart. Which one do you choose to bring into manifestation? That's the magic.
Astrology doesn't tell us where we're going, but it tells us the consequences of the choices that we make as we hit these intersections that we may or may not know about. But of course, knowing about something is always better than not knowing about it.
I always liken my pursuit of astrology to what happens in the last 15 minutes of the Truman Show. It has nothing to do with being sort of filmed on TV and broadcast. But when he gets in that boat, and he's going to sail to the edge of whatever, and he doesn't care if it kills him, but he is going to confront his creator, if you will. The Ed Harris character is effectively God. Christoph, right, is the name of the character. He's going to confront, and he's going to look him in the eye, and he's going to say, I know you're there.
It connects our individual human experiences, which feel normally so disconnected, to cycles of the Earth, cycles of the solar system. So there's this sense of belonging to something larger than ourselves, which I think is one of the healing factors of astrology.
It's like seeing that the universe is sort of acting in tandem with humanity and is sort of following or mirroring our actions down here is something that's actually kind of reassuring.
And I keep having these ahas and these revelations and these flashes of insight that give such aesthetic appreciation and kind of an awakening of my understanding of life.
I feel that many astrologers signed up centuries ago or millennia ago to reincarnate over and over again to carry the torch of the divine wisdom of astrology forward.
It's a journey, it's a path, it's something that you can follow for your life. Astrology is simply a way of, if you will, of analyzing the change, of seeing the change, of trying to verbalize the change. And so from that standpoint, it's a powerful tool. On the other hand, you've still got to go out and live your life.
It just gave me a sense that maybe the cosmos is alive. I mean, I like the end of the Timaeus in Plato has this beautiful story. It says that the world was created as an animal and that the universe is this living animal or this living being.
Astrology is the single intellectual connecting thread between all cultures, and that's why every indigenous culture has some form of astrology. And as we move from the splintered, embattled, chaotic world culture of today to this new culture that's emerging from the ashes of the old, astrology will be the thread that ties all of the pieces together because it's natural, it's in our veins, it's what we are about.
Astrologers are the modern version of the Magi. We traded in our camels for laptops, but for the most part, we're still inspired by looking at the heavens, understanding the cycles and how they relate to events and the lives of people on Earth.
Here's this beautiful language of astrology that no matter how much I studied forever would be an inexhaustible fountain of guidance and wisdom and a complete life.
I think the thing that fascinates me about astrology more than anything else is that the implications are so vast and rich, and the metaphors are unending.
Astrologers, like psychologists and other therapists and counselors, are in the business of helping people. Most astrologers that I know have jobs where they sit down with clients each day and they record the birth charts of those clients. Not only the birth charts, they also look at, over time, what's going on in the transits and progressions, the movements of the heavens over time. And so, through the client consultation, a person can come and be inspired through not only tuning into what their character potential is and working to activate that, but also through understanding the various seasons of the soul and understand the qualities of time.
When I started out as an astrologer, I just wanted to give them all the information, and all the tools, and it was like, here, let me see how much I can pack into a 90-minute session, of translating this amazing chart. And then now I realize it's actually more beneficial if I ask a lot more questions and I zero in on specific things I see in the chart that probably are impacting them psychologically.
The spiritual role that the professional astrologer plays is we remind people of their blueprint that we can see in the birth chart. We remind them of the unfolding of the soul growing into its full capacity through the progressed horoscope, and we help them to cope with the fated circumstances in life by explaining their transits to them. And we can also help them to understand the relationships, using synastry and composite charts.
It's the story that unfolds that really lights up and enriches your understanding of that astrological chart and gives you an insight into the chart and ultimately into the client. It's kind of a back and forth movement. The more you know about the client, the better you can understand what that chart is actually indicating. The more you can understand that chart, the more you can translate that information from the client through the filter of the chart and then feed it back to the client.
I think that people are basically healthy. They're not crazy and sick. Well, we're all crazy and sick in some way, but people are fundamentally healthy when they get here. And they have a core of tremendous power and resources and health. And around that core, crusts of defense and fear and all sorts of neurotic responses form. And what we're doing is helping people poke through all those things to rediscover their resources.
There is an opening to prayer. There's so much in this beautiful language before one does a reading that I do the calculations and then I still hand draw the charts because it's a way of feeling my way into the dynamic. It's kind of just drawing those symbols. So even though we have all this high-tech computer stuff and I calculate that and print the chart, but then I hand draw it. And as I hand draw it, just making those symbols every day, and then you get to honor each person, each part of that person as you're drawing it and going, ooh, patterns, so that they are informing what most wants being said.
When a client comes to me, I look at my job as a magician to pull that poem out of the air, to create that painting that touches them in some way that alters their time-space continuum so that for a moment they're not in crisis over their son or their daughter or their husband or wife or their job or their lack of money or whatever it may be. For a moment, they're in a different universe. They've popped out of their being. And where they are for a moment is they're floating someplace else in another dimension, and they have a perspective that they could have never imagined. And then they are reborn. It's like being in the Bardo states between death and rebirth. And then they go back into their body, they're reborn, they leave my office or leave the session, and hopefully they take with them a piece of magic.
People blossom with energy and self-confidence and creativity when we simply give them the gift of seeing them clearly for 2 hours. How people come to life under the wise and compassionate light of that kind of analysis. Just what being seen means to people.
The intent of the work is to assist an individual in as quickly as possible being in touch with their life purpose.
My process is to examine the chart from the right brain, to feel it, to intuit it, to get a story. When I feel the chart, when I have an emotional connection with the soul, I know I got the chart because I can feel it.
As an evolutionary astrologer, we take levels of evolution into consideration. So where the soul is at, how evolved it is, and this is something you can't see in the chart. So it's only upon meeting with a client that you can see on what level they're operating.
And really what the reading is a cooperative effort between the astrologer and the client of understanding how these symbols take shape in their lives.
If you're using astrology with the intention set in your heart to help other people, it's empowered spiritually. But like anything that can heal or harm, there's also a shadow side or a dark side to the usage of astrology. So I see it as a spiritual force that, if it's used properly, can be of tremendous assistance to people.
There's also an intuitive aspect, like moving into the chart, where I actually begin to feel like I'm this person. Yeah, we're astrologers. So I'm analyzing all this stuff, feeling like I'm in there. And then when I talk to the person, it's just, you feel bonded. They feel understood. They connect. And it helps. It just helps to feel understood.
I'm not terribly predictive because who cares? Today's news wraps tomorrow's fish. I'm interested in the people and their explosive ability to tap into their own resources and to discover their own instincts, which are usually better than anybody else's.
Astrology has a shadow potential to fall into a deterministic and fatalistic mode, and it has done so in different eras and in different individuals. Even to this day, I think some astrologers are too easily prone to give readings that limit the potential of the person they're giving the reading for by saying this means that. But that's a deterministic or fatalistic, I think, misreading of the astrological tradition. But astrology does have also this potential for nourishing a sense of actualizing the potential in somebody's birth chart, in their life, and in that sense allowing their destiny to be fulfilled, their true nature to blossom.
Free will has been an issue that people have been grappling with for millennia, and it's a tough one. And part of the tough one is that when you do something, did you do it because you wanted to, or did you do it because you had to? Because, frankly, it wouldn't look any different to us. And that's the real kicker, If whenever it was fated, if you just got this big purple splotch in your vision field so that you could know that you were stuck with it, it would be a lot easier. But the fact is we can't tell the difference.
You want to go through a cycle of experience. The way you react to it is your free will, the things that you meet. I think Edgar Cayce talked about this, that there are things that you're supposed to meet in the lifetime, and the way you react to them is you're treating them as either stumbling blocks or stepping stones.
There is, in every moment in a session or a reading, in every single breath or pause between the breaths, there is a moment, or there is always the potential for an awakening, an understanding, a new connection.
one of the best things you could ever do is prepare the charts for all of your friends, all of your relatives, all of your classmates, all of the important people you've ever met in your life, your partners, your children, and have them handy and study them and let the reality you already know about them inform you about astrology instead of vice versa. Let life teach you astrology instead of astrology teach you life.
Yeah, I like to try to meditate on the charts for a while. Essentially that means looking at them, thinking about them, letting my mind take in the information, but also start to let some kind of intuition happen, some kind of information that comes from just beyond your rational mind as well. So it's all a process of just studying it. Now I think for people that are getting into it, once you know enough, most people just need to start talking to people about charts. They need to start talking to people and seeing that it flows.
So I spend at minimum 4 hours on a chart, and that's at minimum. I write lots of notes. I copy them for my clients, and they get those too. They love my notes. But I can get really, there's an anxiety about serving the person well.
This is not just the same as a psychic interpretation saying anything. Deep within me is my respect for the structures I've learned of astrology, for the fact that the signs of the zodiac can be cardinal, fixed, mutable, fire, earth, air, water, positive, negative, ruled by a particular planet, the meaning of each of the planets, the study of the concepts. And whenever I want to understand a symbol, I just take a breath and absorb all that and then open my mouth and start speaking. Now, I'm fortunate, I'm quite articulate, but most people can do this. They don't have to be that articulate. If you speak with love and respect for the wisdom, then the right words, you can start a sentence not knowing how it will end, and it will end well, and the next sentence will get better and better and better. As long as you focus and keep close to the meanings, then you will get the interpretation right. And of course, as you do that, you start having flashes of insight and you start thinking what that might mean on the practical level.
When you first get your chart done, it sort of blows you away. It blows your mind because you're just like, whoa, how can this total stranger sitting here next to me, know all this stuff about me? And at the same time, how amazing it is that when I start sharing the details of my life, that they can give me guidance that totally acts as the greatest counselor on the planet because it helps guide you into how to use the energy of the timing in your life.
I allow imagery, stories, metaphor to emerge, and I try to construct the most vivid type of story.
There are patterns of destiny that a soul brings into this lifetime to work on, some lessons to learn. This can be material plane lessons as well as spiritual lessons. And it showed me, particularly the Vedic system, showed me these, what I would call developmental life patterns or cycles. They're called dashas. It showed the unfoldment of my potential.
One thing I keep emphasizing to my students, a simple line, almost like a bumper sticker, is trust the symbols. Just dive in.
Astrology is a lot like a finely tuned lens that you bring the focus together, and with this focus you can sharpen up your capacity to see and understand yourself, your life.
The level of insight and understanding I get into their chart on the basis of the story that unfolds organically in the sessions is much greater than anything I could have come up with on my own.
Putting yourself in this position as an astrologer is something that's very sacred.
I always get that same feeling that I got when I first started looking at charts, and that is that, you know what, I don't understand this. Nobody can understand this. Yeah, I always get that. That's always for sure. Because the human nature, our lives here are filled with mystery. There is so much mystery. In a way, when we're doing astrology, we're attempting to plumb the depths of that mystery, but believe me, it's far deeper than we're going to ever get.
I think it's vital to understand that the knowledge that you hold within yourself, that the human spirit, the mind, the emotional capacity that you have exceeds anything that anyone else can teach you or that you can read in any book. That there is a degree of self-trust that's essential for doing the job. intention goes a long way. If you trust yourself, basically you're going to help people.
Our goal is not to be right. Our goal is to let people's potential and resources emerge.
Now, each particular chart, right? You just take a look at the chart. Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. You look at the chart. You think each sign, each planet, this person has such and such rising, and try to wear it. Put it on your own body. Feel it. I have this ascendant. I have this moon. I have this sun. I have this aspect. I try to personalize it. I think to myself, what would it be like to wear this clothes? Because after all, that's what our chart is. It's just a uniform we've adopted for this time.
Predicting the future is a fairly foolish task, and all we can do is, I think we can get a sense, looking at the planetary alignments, of the basic archetypal dynamics that will be at work. But I think just on the basis of the astrological perspective, what we are given through that is extraordinary insight into the archetypal dynamics, but not into the specific way it's going to come through.
Transits are what is going on in the sky right now, and those transits are for everybody, but they don't affect everybody the same way. They come down into your chart or my chart and will affect us personally only if it's touching off something in our chart. But also we are part of the social flow, and those transits out there are going to affect the social flow.
In a way, what I see with the transits is that they are there to take a particular part of the chart and bring it into sharp relief, so that if you have a particular aspect of your chart that needs further evolution or activation, it gets activated by a major transit.
There is an absolutely positive way to use the energies of any transit that you can name, any transit or direction. There is nothing that is inherently bad. They all have a positive manifestation. It is our choice. And the old argument of fate and free will goes back for millennia. But I've kind of always looked at it this way, is that in a way they're paradoxical. We can't know for absolutely sure how much fate we have and how much is free will. So if we don't know it, it only makes sense for us to act as though we had almost unlimited free will.
When you think about transits and progressions, from a psychological perspective, we like to think of transits representing qualities of durations of time. It's the quality of the time that I think the transit describes. We can always hypothesize about particular events that might occur, and they can be important, but I think mainly as catalysts or as a vehicle for stimulating certain psychological processes, certain developmental processes. So the meaning of the event in and of itself is not so important, other than its purpose, how it stimulates and activates and challenges the psyche in very specific ways to deepen, to change, to transform, to heal, to evolve.
The benefits of astrology are tremendous. First of all, you get to find out what kind of character you are, what kind of potentials you have. You know, most people go through life with a sort of a subtle awareness of, you know, they might have a talent here or potential there, but rarely is this confirmed. When someone gets an astrology consultation for the first time, they find out, and it confirms all the things they thought about themselves and more. You know, it's like the whole menu of their personality is laid before them, and it's like you finally have permission to be yourself, to be true to your own birth vision. You know, everyone's born in response to a spiritual need on the planet, and it's up to you to step into that potential.
Astrology is the intersection of everything else. It's the cellular functioning of the solar system, the whole thing. All disciplines you can find in astrology, everything. It is the macro study of it all.
It's been such a gift to help people really see their purpose and see where they're going and help orient them to their life context.
Astrology has the power to transform lives, has the power to connect you to yourself and to the divine.
I was teaching in a secondary school, and I was responsible for their behaviour as their housemaster. The children were most difficult, were often, you could get through to them once you knew their chart. You couldn't even approach to understand them without knowing their chart. And I thought it was such a tragedy that I couldn't use this knowledge openly in the classroom and in my counselling work with the kids.
If you're lucky, if you're really on and if you have a good relationship with your client, you can facilitate the client's own instincts in what he or she has to do.
Astrology is a map, but instead of being a map in space, it's a map in time.
But I think the heart of astrology is the recognition both that we're all unique and the recognition that people don't act the way they do to be malicious. Very few people are malicious, I think, at heart. I think instead, people are wired a certain way. And one of the most common failings people make is to think, if I think this way, they should think this way. If I act this way, they should act this way to me. Not recognizing that we all have our own temperament.
Astrology shows that everybody is somebody, that there's room for everybody, that the differences we have are there for a reason. And it encourages a person to be oneself and not try to be someone else.
And that's what interests me the most, how we as human beings can fulfill our potential. I think we're definitely a work in progress, have an enormous amount to learn about the potential of who we are and what we can do.
And I think it makes you much more tolerant of other people because you really get that people aren't wired the same way. And that's really a powerful thing to know as a human being.
Astrology just gave me, for lack of a better way of describing it, a higher vision of me and a higher vision of everyone and everything in my life. I think prior to having this as a tool in my life, I looked at things much more from a psychological standpoint. More, this is where I grew up, these were my parents, this is what the culture was like, this is what I was taught. I don't know that I really even gave that much credence to I am my own individual, I'm made a certain way. I would say that astrology helped me understand that the uniqueness of each of us.
I would say that astrology combines elements of both mythology and astronomy. It is the study of cycles, of planetary cycles, that astronomy involves itself in. In fact, the very predictive part of astrology really comes from astronomy. But the art of interpretation that is so key to astrological theory and awareness comes from, I think, the mythology of how these stars and planets are connected to the stories, because each human has a story also. And we are all playing out constantly elements of those stories.
Astrology is Jnana Yoga. It's the yoga of knowledge. And we are, all of us, when we are really practicing astrology, it's a path through life. Life teaches us. The soul develops by being in life, and astrology is a very fast way of catching the lessons quickly.
If you watch your transits for a year in this interplanet way, you really get to know all the dormant parts of your personality and what it looks like as those parts come out. And so in a way, it's a way to get to know all of the parts of yourself by watching yourself over time and seeing the patterns that exist within your one life.
It isn't about knowing what's going to happen. What you're going to learn from astrology, if you get your chart done, is here are possibilities. And if you know that you want to do a creative project, say write a book, doesn't it make sense to sort of look at what the cosmic flow is for the year to decide when is the best time to really be burrowing in and focusing seriously on doing the writing and staying incredibly disciplined, and that there will come a time when the complete opposite will happen and you need to put yourself out there in a bigger way, meeting people, connecting, trying to find agents, promoting yourself, that there are times to plan certain things that are going to work much better because you're going to be working with the flow of the universe.
We think a little bit, not much.
We mainly feel. We're mainly feeling beings. And in the Vedic system, the moon refers to that quality of mind, or manas is what it's called, which is the feeling, thinking, substance process. It's sort of what we're all kind of gravitating toward, how we're feeling. That's what the moon shows.
One of the coolest aspects of astrology is just moving your planets around the birth chart, you know, they're called transits, and watching how events in your life line up, you know. One of the things I tell students is like, just watch the moon go around your chart for 3 months and take notes, you know, write down how you felt, because the moon's about emotion and feeling and emotional contentment. And I said, watch how you feel when the moon goes through each house, or when it aligns with one of your planets in your natal chart. And then just watch that cycle, you know, keep a journal for a month, and then another month, and then another month. And after 3 months, go back and compare. Like, okay, when the moon was in my first house, here's how I felt. And you'll be amazed about the similarities that happen there. The correlations are amazing.
I think if we understood the horoscope of every child, as a teacher we taught, if we, not only individuals, but also generations or sub-generations, every year Jupiter changes sign. Every year a particular group of children will have a different way of expanding. Every 2.5 years, Saturn changes sign. The way you control kids 3 years from now is going to be different to the way you control them now. Now, these are incredibly valuable things. They can help you design curriculum, so the curriculum really suits the kids that are coming in. It doesn't undermine anything. It doesn't take away anything we want to teach them. It makes it so much easier. We're not fighting battles to try and force kids to behave like the kids last year. The boys last year, the girls last year did brilliant at this. Why can't you be as good as them? Answer: because our fashion, our taste has changed completely. It could completely positively revolutionise education. But at the moment, the broadcasting regulations in England at least say it is harmful and offensive to teach children astrology.
Synastry is the term we use in astrology for examining what I suppose we would call chemistry between any two or more individuals. Certainly a lot of people often want to know about how their relative synastry with their romantic partner. Family members are also a fairly common area of inquiry, and even friends and co-workers and what have you.
My focus now is really with locational astrology, and that's my main passion. That's what I mainly help people with these days, is finding better places to live.
I think that what fascinates me most about astrology is that it really is the bridge between mysticism and science.
I was looking for something deeper, something that would give me a hinge into this deeper process that we call spirituality. When I got into astrology, I discovered that there was such a magnificent order to the universe and to life. I began to say to myself, you know, this can be nothing but divine.
I struggle a little bit with, how does astrology work? Because we're a little out of step with the society and somewhat, everybody wants things kind of empirical, and it's not empirical. So, I'm leaning more and more to astrology being kind of oracular, and this kind of a moment of communion between two people where we step out of our busy lives and we sit down with each other, and God or spirit or magic comes in, and when that happens, symbols come alive.
Because the secret is, astrology is this beautiful disc language that is so radical, so liberating, so extraordinary, so needed, that it has been suppressed and exiled and trivialized. And what we're doing is sucking our complicity out of the trivialization, and going, no, it is a beautiful language of complexity.
I felt like I had stumbled through the most amazing door and discovered one of the keys to the universe.
What fascinates me is that it works. That it works. In the beginning, I couldn't believe that it worked, that it would work, that it could work. And then I saw it working. I was doing charts and seeing the correlations between the charts and people's lives. And it really disturbed me. It bothered me. I had to try to understand, how is this working? Why is it working?
I think psychology without astrology lacks soul.
According to a recent publishing survey, there are roughly 50 million astrology buffs in this country, America alone. Now, when I say 50 million astrology buffs, I don't mean people like astrologers who do their charts and, but people who buy the mugs and the t-shirts and the stuff that says Aries on it. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of people who know there's a connection between us and the world outside.
It's being in rhythm or in tune with the cosmic environment, going with the flow of cosmic energy, being part of the solar system, maybe I could say, but actually we're going far beyond the solar system now in astrology too. I think just being in rhythm with the cosmos.
After all, that the origin of astrology comes from that dictum from Hermes. As above, so below, as within, so without. It's not cause and effect. It's actually a way of seeing how everything is connected. The night sky and our inner psyche are the same thing. So to know something about what's happening in the sky, to recognize, oh yeah, tonight is going to be the Moon-Venus conjunction. Let's go be with it. That's the ceremony.
All I knew was that there were these 12 signs and that a person could be just one of these 12 signs. And like most people who don't know any more than that about astrology, it didn't make much sense to me that one could divide the human race very simply and elegantly into 12 types that way. But upon reading my first book, I learned that not only did we have a sun sign, we had a moon sign, a Mercury sign, a Venus sign, and so forth.
I don't, however, for the most part, plan my life by it. I more like study it as a discipline and as a way of helping people to some extent. But most importantly for me, it's that it teaches me that the universe is not wired the way we were taught it was wired in school. The universe is infinitely weirder than they would have us believe.
Astrology has simply convinced the doubting, rational, kind of objective, even scientific parts of my mind that life is meaningful and purposeful. You see it unfolding, all the patterns that might be interpreted as random, chaos theory, you never know what's going to come down the road kinds of events, actually seem to emerge in an orderly, systematic way, as if it's not just a happy idea that we are evolving consciousnesses, but a demonstrable principle that we can prove, predict, explore, and understand through astrology.
People can't be forced awake. Everyone needs to awaken at their own time. And you can't make someone see what they don't see. Life events sometimes wake people up. And when they do, and they call me as an astrologer, I'm there to catalyze and to accentuate and to blow their mind even further open.
We want to compost tyranny, as a rich nutrient for the culture of reverent ingenuity that we aspire to grow. So here's and here's how it could be.
I don't think you'll find a more interesting group and a more eclectic group of people anywhere in any field. I mean, the courage it takes to be an astrologer. I think to be a really good astrologer requires a certain level of intelligence, a certain capacity for symbolic thinking, a certain spiritual openness, a certain rigor and discipline. There's all sorts of qualities that it takes to be an astrologer that shows up in the quality of people that do well in this field that I just feel blessed to be a part of this community.
Go out into the night and watch for a couple of hours over courses of a month or so to see the movements of the stars and the planets, to see that to not just look at it in the ephemeris or on the computer screen, to see how you are really a part of the universe. You're deeply connected to it, and there's such this gracious movement of cyclical alignments that are just absolutely elegant.
Pursuing astrology, exploring this knowledge, learning as much as we can about it, I'm quite certain that this is one of the central focuses that will allow us to actually become the creatures we actually think we are.
I feel very privileged to be one of many people who are holding a torch of awareness and consciousness that is perhaps acting as an anti-de-evolutionary mechanism in this very difficult historical time that we live in, where every bit of consciousness that can be lit, every flame of awareness that can be charged or brightened is another ray of hope.
The most powerful thing about astrology is that when you immerse yourself in it, you feel connected to something bigger, something larger. You feel connected to nature.
This is perhaps not for the faint of heart, but my favorite metaphor is to ask a person to imagine that they're lying on their deathbed at the end of their life, and they feel okay about it, that they're ready to die, and not out of defeat or despair or anything like that, but they just simply have a almost triumphant feeling that they've lived the life that they were supposed to live, and whatever is next, they're ready for it. The question, how do you do that? How do you get to the end of your life with that kind of attitude? And the birth chart is the answer. It's like a blueprint for the life you're supposed to live.
The new version of the vow of the Bodhisattva is that bringing spirit, compassion into all of creation. The earth herself is a sentient being. And when we lose that connection, we lose our humanness. So we're accepting and loving our journey of being here at this planet at this time. There could be no more amazing experience than to be alive at the turning of the ages. I mean, it's beyond what happened 2,000 years ago when the Magi looked for the star.
Any system, when it's done really well, can deliver the goods. And I'm reminded of the story Alan Oken once told me when he went to India. Alan went and saw this Vedic astrologer, this great sage there, and he was talking, they were talking, and Alan told him that he did astrology. And this old wise man looks at Alan and he says, "Oh, would you do my chart?" And Alan looks at him and goes, "But sir, our cosmologies are totally different, you know." And the old astrologer looked at him and says, "Don't you understand, my son?" He says, "Life is all the same image. It's just seen through different lenses. So how focused is your lens?"
I consider myself a guy who lives under the dock in a little boat. And then people come and they knock on the dock, and then they climb into my boat and I row them across wherever the hell they're going, and I always, I make them forget where we're going by telling them stories and laughing. And we get to the other side, they get out, I row back, get back under the dock, wait for the next beep, beep, beep. And, that's what I do.
The way I got inspired to do this documentary was that when Jupiter came around for the third time, it always happens when you're 35, you have the Jupiter return. And it's kind of like a solar return or a new moon for the year, like a new moon in your first house, but it's for the next 12 years. So usually a vision will come. Jupiter has the visionary power, especially in its ancient rulership of Pisces, the sign of the mystic, the visionary, and the poet. And I guess in modern times it would be the filmmaker too. And so I got the vision of doing this documentary during that Jupiter conjunction, and Mars came by too. So it's Jupiter, Mars, on my Jupiter, Mars, and Neptune in the 12th house. Spiritual visions and imagination. And I was thinking about The Secret, and I was thinking about documentaries, and I had been doing film for 2 years, working on a film in Asheville called Moon Europa. I was an extra, but I was also over there like learning everything from all the professionals, and asking them questions and picking their brains. And I took some filmmaking classes. I had a little bitty camera just gifted to me right when Neptune hit my sun sign 2 years ago.
Wow.
In Aquarius. And then suddenly Jupiter came to my ascendant, and it was time for action. I couldn't dream about it anymore in the 12th house. I said, I mapped it all out with notebooks, and I just said, it's time to do it. So I just took the leap of faith, got all the equipment, and went to my first astrology conference, well, not my first, but my first astrology conference in lieu of the video. And I basically started talking to astrologers and saying, can I interview you? And everybody was really wide open about it. And next thing you know, I came home from the NCGR conference in Baltimore, Maryland. And I was just like so enthused and so fired up because I got 19 hours of video and this new high definition camera, and I was just like, yes, it's gonna happen. And then Moses, the blast, wanted me to film the blast. And so, by the time I'm done, I'll have 60 hours of video, including the storytelling elements, the screenplay I'm writing. And I have to compress it down to 2 hours. But there's going to be a website for that.
What do you think about the 2012?
2012 is a great date. We have We have a lot of stuff going on. We have the big, Pluto's going into Capricorn, and we saw with the transformation of religion in Sagittarius and our visions crossing the galactic center, it's going to be the same thing with structures and powers that be. So governments, their shadow side is going to have to be faced with abuse of power. Pluto just comes along and says, how have you been handling your power? If you've been handling it responsibly, it empowers you even further, gives you more wealth. Pluto means wealth in Greek. And so when Pluto comes along, it says, I'm here to empower you, but if you haven't been using your power responsibly, it has to destroy you and rebirth you and transform you and make you rise out of the ashes. So it's sort of like it faces you with a divine will and says, you have to take responsibility for your actions, and it usually brings a lot of change. So changes in structures, with Uranus going into Aries, it's going to be very volatile, because basically the 60s generation that came in with Uranus conjunct Pluto and Virgo, as it's been unfolding, it's coming to a square. So we're going to see the 60s kids, they were born with that generation, we're going to see them come into their empowerment. The square is about conflict for growth, passion, and individuation, which is the Jungian word for be true to your own unique path. Don't live according to what the world's saying is important. The big house, success, all that stuff. Live according to your dreams. Like this documentary is a dream of mine. I want to pursue it. And common sense says, oh, you're going to go make a documentary? I'm like, it's a vision. I gotta live according to it. I wouldn't feel right in my soul if I didn't follow my dream. So if I can introduce a new model of success based on following your chart and living your spiritual gifts that the divine has given you that are reflective right in the chart, and then following the cycles and knowing when those moments are activated, and then going for it, taking action, courage through action. To me, as we're standing here, the sun just set, it's in Aries, the sign of courage through action. It's like, seize the day, And then Saturn's over in Leo saying, get disciplined about creativity through dramatic performance. So you got creativity and action coming together, which creates the third point over in Sagittarius, the mutable sign of meaning, right? So meaning emerges from creative action. And Sagittarius to me is the principle of faith through divine inspiration. So it's moments like this where you step out and you step out your door and you embrace the unknown. That's what Scorpio's about. Scorpio's about making a friend with the unknown and being able to bridge it. I actually wrote my first poem after going through a really intense experience down in Key West, a scorpionic rebirth, a divorce, change, all of the boards. And I was sitting out looking out over the ocean and I was heartbroken. And I wrote this poem called Engaging the Infinite, and it sums up how I approach astrology. It goes, above the wavering sea, stars await your return, mirrored across the deep span stretching within. The curving space between here and there is endless, yet it seems like you've been abandoned in the emptiness. You can never stop the flow of dark imagery coursing through your heart. Those chambers of guilt and fear always struggle to contain the tingling fire dancing as your soul. It hurts to be free, it hurts to be free. But when you step into your passion, the whole universe awakens within, and others may wander with black holes for hearts, devouring your visions with their fears. But tell me, how old are you? That's not your age. It's simply the number of orbits you've made around this star. You've made many orbits around other stars, like a timeless electron zipping around an atomic nucleus. You are infinite, and if you argue for your limitations, you have to fight them. But if you discover your possibilities, you get to create them. So stand still, gaze at the sky, sense the awe, the reverence rising inside, and know that your being, your aliveness, is an extension of eternity. So that's kind of like my guiding poem for this life now. Living at the edge, passionately embracing your projects,
My life is astrology. I wake up, I sleep, I dream, I think. It's an absolute complete obsession. And frankly, I'm not real proud of it. It's caused a lot of problems. But it could be worse. I could be addicted to chocolate.
Contemplate that mystery.
I'm just looking for myself, not for anybody else. I'm just trying to find myself, just for me, just for me. I spend my whole life having to belong to a certain space and time, and I've had to sing someone else's song. Now I think it's time for mine. I'm just looking for myself, not for anybody else. I'm just trying to find myself, just for me, just for me.
If you figure out the secret of life, hey man, drink the Kool-Aid.